Firebugs. A short story by Mossomo. Chapter 27. The Greasy Spoon. Historic downtown Sonora slipped past like a page in a history book. Brick buildings leaned into each other, Romanesque arches framing shadowed doorways. Opera halls, old jails, Victorian homes. They all jostled for space along crooked streets, worn by a century of footsteps and wagon wheels. The Sonora Dome gleamed white on the hillside, Tuscan columns catching the last of the fading light. St. James Episcopal's red spire pierced the skyline. Washington Street hummed faintly with echoes of the gold rush, preserved shops and diners lining the pavement like ghosts waiting for the next coin to drop. The van turned down a narrow alley behind Diamondback Grill. Garbage bins rattled. The smell hit first: stale fryer oil, rot, urine, old smoke, and a dusting of fried onions gone to mold. Pete cut the engine. The windows steamed with heat and human breath. A barrel of fry grease waited beside the dumpster, its lid crusted with congealed fat, sealed tight, liquid gold. "Yahoo!" Pete muttered, jumping out and grabbing his filter kit from the back. 2 buckets, a micron filter, and a funnel. Gustavo followed and popped the van's side door, an unspoken invitation for the family to spill out. Piglet took it as permission and bolted, punting a wilted lettuce head full force into the backside of the building. Sass wrinkled her nose, already regretting the alley and its sour bouquet, and climbed back into the van. Goldie sniffed everything, circled twice, then settled into a cautious crouch beside the dumpster. That's when the dad saw it, a discarded needle, half buried between the grease barrel and the rusted bin. "Cleo, van, now." Dad's voice cracked like a whip, stern in a way the girls rarely heard. Piglet obeyed, sulking as if she'd broken something. Pete turned from the family moment and flagged Gustavo. "No grass, no ass, no ride," he said, half joking, disregarding the children present. "You got no grass, and I don't want your ass. Now pay attention, boys." He launched into a boot camp on his biodiesel filter rig, buckets, funnel, micron filters, and the order that kept the whole thing from turning into sludge. Pete had the dad pry the lid off the barrel with a screwdriver. The dad gagged. Dead bugs, flies, and mosquitoes floated in the fry grease like a plague. Pete laughed. Gustavo grunted, grabbing the filter kit. A Mexican and a family man, working for the hippie. A mother would be proud. Gustavo scooped from the putrid barrel, pouring viscous brown sludge through the micron mesh into a second bucket. The dad poured it back through a finer mesh. Gustavo followed with a third pass, this time through a 5-micron filter. It wasn't immediate. It took minutes. The dad held the funnel while Gustavo poured into the tank. The process was not fun. It was not quick. Grease spilled once, twice, thrice, shoes soaked, pants stained, shirts streaked with fryer filth. The dumpster diver aesthetic wasn't a choice. It was earned. Hair clung to sweat-slick foreheads, hands reeked of rancid oil, and every movement left a trail. Both men swore. Rinse, repeat, for hours. While the 2 men wrangled buckets and filters, the girls busied themselves in the van. Pete took a moment with the Goldie, a pat on the head, a rub behind the ears. "Who's a good boy?" he whispered, voice low and reverent, like he'd found something pure in the wreckage. After an hour of foul-smelling labor, the tanks were full. Gustavo wiped his hands on his jeans, smearing grease into the denim and deepening his already threadbare look. Princess shot Pete a glare, unimpressed by his growing fondness for the dog. Piglet, meanwhile, was scanning for her daddy. The dad hunched over his phone, fingers smudging the screen as he dialed. "University of Reno. Tomorrow. Meet us there," he said to his wife, voice low and steady. Then the call softened, dissolving into a quiet, emotional reunion, cellular, fragile, real. Gustavo climbed back into the van. Pete stowed the tools and took the helm. Dad checked on his girls, wiping noses, tying shoes, offering water and snacks, the quiet rituals of care. Then the Goldie made his move, leapt into the front seat, and settled beside Gustavo with the kind of confidence only a dog can carry. No permission asked. None needed. Pete reached over and scratched behind his ears, a silent welcome. Pete then keyed the ignition. The engine coughed, spluttered, and roared awake, a growl of reclaimed motion. Piglet whooped. The van lurched forward, grease-slicked salvation, carrying them past alley walls smeared in shadow, into the streets of Sonora proper. The historic downtown dissolved behind them, a mix of gold-era charm and present decay. Embers, wood-fired foods glowed warmly. The armory's rooftop lights winked above scattered tables. Diamondback Grill's sign swung lazily in the night air. They didn't pause. They couldn't. Smoke drifted down the hills, the horizon lit in orange haze. The van rolled on, carrying their small, motley family away from the fire, into a night still thick with danger, but with a heartbeat of hope, powered by stolen grease and grit. Chapter 28. The Feast on CA-36. There in the distance, the fire spotted its prey. The EV sat alone on the highway shoulder, matte finish dulled by ash, sensors blind, hazard lights long dead. No alarm, no resistance. Just a dumb sentinel waiting for judgment. The wind paused, as if holding its breath. Even the insects had fled. Inside the cabin, a child's sock lay curled beneath the seat. A receipt fluttered in the cup holder. The ghost of a life interrupted lingered in coffee stains, fingerprints, a forgotten charger. The car held memory, not motion. Inch by inch, mile by mile, the fire crept closer. It thrilled at the chase, its limbs crackling with anticipation as the wind dragged sparks forward, scouts ahead of an army. The air, once still, began to warp and shimmer, the ghost of heat rising from the asphalt. A low, hungry roar rumbled from the inferno, the sound of a beast readying itself to feed. The advance began in earnest. The fire stretched out a long, serpentine tongue, tasting the road ahead. Plastic trim on the car's exterior bubbled first, its clean lines dissolving into a grotesque, melting ripple. The side mirrors, like exhausted sentries, drooped and slumped from their mounts, their glass popping with a sigh. The fire pressed its face against the car's flank and heard the satisfying pop of metal under heat, the car's sealed tomb of a cabin groaning. Then came the percussion. A battery cell ruptured, a sharp, violent crack that punctuated the building chaos. Another followed, then another, a chain of explosions rattling out, like musket fire, across some forgotten battlefield. Each report was a punctuation mark on the car's destruction, a final, percussive death knell. The fire purred, curling itself around the shell, the hungry sound a low hiss of satisfaction. It licked the tires to melted malodorous stubs and peeled paint from the car like skin from a fruit. It sucked the last breath from the cabin, leaving only a vacuum of scorched air. Glass gave way with a mournful sigh, collapsing inward like surrender. Every morsel was devoured, every seam undone. Now the fire was smug, full, and arrogant. It believed itself brighter than the sun, though the sun had only set for the evening. The blaze lifted its gaze to the hills, its orange glow a reflection of its bloated, self-satisfied ego. And everywhere, its children rose, flares on ridge lines, flags of conquest unfurling in the dark. A father watching his brood. Proud. Chapter 29. Burn the Blueprint. The patron stood alone, sleeves rolled, tie gone. The briefcase at his feet wasn't for contracts anymore. It was for fire, for control. He felt the weight in his hands, the promise inside the latches. Moonlight caught the metal latches, gleaming cold and sharp, like a silent warning. Burn the blueprint, the wall behind him declared. Fresh paint, still tacky, a message, a declaration. He took a step, then another, boots crunching over loose rock and shards of glass. Nothing rushed, nothing stumbled. every motion deliberate. The canyon below waited, dry and brittle, a canvas. He smelled it, pine, dead leaves, dust, dry enough to carry a spark into ruin. He knelt, poured the accelerant, smelled the chemical bite. Lighter flicked, flame leapt. He leaned forward, felt it rise into the cheatgrass like a living thing. Smoke hit his nose, hot and sharp, curling around him. Sparks drifted upward, caught in the wind, bouncing over rocks like fireflies gone mad. He held his breath. The fire moved fast, but he was faster, thinking steps ahead. A brittle tree cracked, he heard it like a warning. Ash spun in eddies, wrapping around his legs, whispering, "Yes, this is right." The flames climbed, licking toward the ridgeline. He felt them, not just saw them, the heat brushing his face, pressing at his chest. The canyon seemed alive, responsive, inhaling at his command. Each gust of wind carried his work further, carried chaos. He straightened, chest tight, eyes on every pulse of orange across the slope. The fire wasn't random, it wasn't blind. It was precise. It was his. Smoke coiled into the sky like a signal, rich and deliberate, a message, a warning, an invitation. This was no accident, no chance, a copycat, an echo, a fire born from the same hunger as the one the family had fled, a predator shaped by his hand. Same rhythm, same intent, same ruin. He took a slow step backwards, watching, admiring. Already, the canyon responded. Already, the chaos obeyed. Satisfied, he turned. Chapter 30. Dominion of Flame. On the ridges, the fire climbed higher. It had grown broad-shouldered now, deliberate in its hunger, a presence that stretched across the hills like a living thing. Smoke rose in fat columns, twisting into the night sky like cathedral spires. Sparks drifted lazily downward, then snapped upright again, like stars pulled by some unseen hand. It knew no triumph, no defeat, only the joy of burning, the meticulous pleasure of eating. Timber, grass, brush, homes, everything offered was accepted without question, received with a silent, consuming grace. It was an artist at work, not in malice, but with perfect, inhuman indifference. Each lick of flame was a brushstroke, each heat wave a flourish, measured and precise. It began in the quiet places, among forgotten needles and dried leaves, tasting the earthy richness of decay. The fire was a patient glutton, not a sprinter. It worked its way up, from humble underbrush to the resinous bark of ancient pines, climbing like a ladder toward the sky. Then it found the homes, the little wooden boxes filled with the scent of human life, of paint and plastic and old photographs. A momentary pause, not of hesitation but of contemplation. Then it reached out. The fire entered through a window, a single red spear of heat. It explored the living room, a whisper of orange light across the ceiling. A curtain, a simple, delicate meal, shriveled and disappeared with a single breath. The rest followed, a percussive pop of glass, a sizzle of wallpaper, and the deep, contented roar of a belly being filled. It was not a battle, but a surrender, a total and absolute giving way of all things to its hungry nature. It found the attic, where insulation went up like a birthday cake's frosting, and descended to the basement, where even the cold concrete was warmed to a trembling surrender. When it was done, when the house was but a skeleton of charred timbers against the red and orange sky, the fire felt neither satisfaction nor regret. It was simply sated for a moment, a bright, pulsing jewel of heat at the heart of the wreckage. Its appetite, though momentarily quieted, was infinite and constant. It rose from the ashes, gathering its energy, and turned its attention back to the forest, to the next patch of grass, the next waiting meal. It was not a monster, but a force. And a force does not hate, it only consumes. Below, valleys and towns lay in uneasy stillness. Some streets were empty, houses spared by quirks of wind and slope. Others had surrendered, blackened, gutted, smoke still curling from their frames. The fire paid them no mind. Its concern was only the act of burning, the endless rhythm of consumption, the satisfaction of claiming the land in its slow, crackling authority. Along the ridges, new flares spouted, as sparks landed on dry brush, igniting a dozen small progeny fires that twisted and grew like children learning to run. The fire watched its own brood with pride, the warmth and light reflecting off clouds and night air. Each blaze carried the same ruthless elegance, the same hungry choreography, a testament to the patience and perfection of fire's own design. And still it pressed on, mile by mile, ridge by ridge, tracing the contours of the land with relentless inevitability. Nothing could claim it. No rule or road could slow it. The world below bent around it, giving way to the quiet authority of its heat. For now, it burned. Not in haste, not in anger, but with unshakable certainty, a slow, confident dominion that would not end until something far greater intervened. Until then, it continued, majestic, patient, unstoppable. Chapter 31. Unpleasant Sanctuary. Pete's VW bus hybrid, a battered arc of faded rainbows and eco-conscious engineering, rolled into Reno. The smoke had thinned. The horizon was clearing. Streetlights flickered on as evening descended, fragile and uncertain. Traffic hummed. Storefronts glowed with fluorescent insistence, as if the world dared to exist normally again. Briefly. Precariously. But enough. The knot in Pete's stomach, tight for days, loosened by degrees as he steered through barricades and National Guard checkpoints. Families and evacuees lined the streets, shadows of themselves, moving with the slow rhythm of exhaustion. Ahead, the University of Nevada's campus spread out, familiar brick and lawns, transformed now into triage. Guards moved with brisk precision, radios crackling against the dusk. On the grass, once manicured, now ragged, tents stood in uneven rows, cots, water lines, a field hospital under floodlights. Pete slowed, scanning faces. Then he saw him, a figure in a sun-bleached green jacket, standing near the curb, waiting. Pete stopped the van. The engine sighed into silence. A guard stepped forward, sunburned and tired, his voice sharp with rehearsed efficiency. "Relief lot's got RVs, campers," he said, gesturing toward the far end of the lot. "People figuring it out." Then he pivoted, pointing toward Mackay Stadium. "Cots in the stadium. Gym for the sick and elderly, quad side. For people, not—" Pete cut him short. "People, not animals." The guard's gaze flicked to the golden retriever in the back. His stance softened, just slightly. "I like dogs," he said, "but I don't make the rules." The van rolled into the relief lot, past pop-up kitchens and rows of porta-johns. "I gotta pee!" The girls' voices rose, overlapping, urgent. Their father sighed and shepherded them toward the chemical blue row. Inside the sweltering stall, he lifted them one at a time, steadying them over the grimy commode. Waiting her turn, Piglet smeared a finger across the graffitied wall and dragged it across her sister's cheek. Princess burst into tears. The stress, the stink, the indignity. Even here, in the illusion of safety, the fire clung, in the nostrils, in the clothes, in the back of the throat. Pete saw his moment. The family was distracted. The dog was right there. He could back out, vanish into the night, and no one would stop him. But Gustavo pointed to the cat, curled inside its carrier, asleep with the unguarded trust of something that believed itself safe. The bond between the girls and their pet was too clean, too innocent. To break it would be theft. Pete's foot lifted off the gas and settled back into park. They stayed. The dad and girls returned from their ordeal and tumbled back into the van, their mood soured by the chemical stench and Princess's lingering tears. The dad's sigh was a familiar weight in the front seat. Pete, hands tight on the wheel, pulled out of the rest area. A National Guard soldier, face blank with exhaustion, pointed toward a sprawling dirt lot on the edge of campus. It wasn't an invitation. It was a weary directive. They rumbled over cracked pavement into the designated relief lot, a field of uneven gravel and churned-up earth. The aroma of diesel fumes, cheap cooking oil, and unwashed humanity was a solid physical presence, a stark contrast to the sterile halls they'd just passed. Here was the real consequence of the disaster, a holding pen for the displaced. Rows of makeshift shelters, some flimsy tents, others modular units, were arranged with military precision, but their inhabitants moved with the slow, disjointed gait of people in a waking dream. The lot was a symphony of distaste. The whine of a portable generator droned relentlessly. The ground, a mix of dirt and gravel, was slick with spilled water and other fluids. Discarded food containers and plastic bottles littered the edges. A child's wail pierced the low murmur of conversation. But it was the smell that settled hardest, a dense, cloying miasma that clung to the van's interior, a composite of sweat, fear, and institutional cleaner. And yet, there were pockets of fragile recovery. A woman sat on a fold-out chair, carefully braiding her daughter's hair. A group of men shared a thermos of coffee, their hushed conversation a lifeline. Near a makeshift kitchen, the rhythmic chop of vegetables and the sizzle of oil offered a fragile promise of normalcy. A man with a thick beard and kind eyes played a worn acoustic guitar, his song a simple folk tune that hung in the air like a balm. For the first time since the fire, the family felt a sense of safety. Here, they were just another face in the crowd. The fear of being hunted, of being alone, began to recede. The soldiers moved through the lot not with the crisp efficiency of checkpoints, but with a softer, more protective air. They were guardians now, not enforcers. Pete eased the van into a narrow spot between a family with a pickup truck and a man meticulously arranging gear near a dome-shaped shelter. The engine went quiet. The silence settled around them like a weighted blanket. Not a good silence, but a quiet one. A quiet that allowed for the slow, hesitant onset of relief. They had survived the fire, the smoke, the long road. Now, in the heart of this unpleasant sanctuary, they could begin to rebuild. In the relief lot, people mingled, trading stories, food, silence. The dog bounded free, tail high. The girls chased after her. Pete found a frisbee and tossed it into the air. Piglet lunged past her sister, squealing with triumph. Other children joined, drawn to motion and laughter. Adults watched, some even smiling. Pete unstrapped his guitar, letting chords spill into the evening. The sound was thin, but warm, fragile as thread, steady as breath. No one noticed when Gustavo unzipped the cat carrier. The little creature stirred, blinked once, then stretched with theatrical grace. Back arched, tail flicking like a ribbon. It climbed into his lap without hesitation, circled twice, and settled in with a sigh. Gustavo didn't move. He simply rested a hand on its back, feeling the faint purr beneath his palm. In the swirl of the relief lot, voices, footsteps, distant generators, they sat together, a still point in the chaos. Just a man and a cat, sharing a moment of peace. Firebugs. A short story by Mossomo, the final chapter. The quiet negotiation. They slept in the van, all of them, fire gypsies for now. Pete curled in the driver's seat, neck kinked in an unforgiving angle. Gustavo slumped against the window, one boot off, one on. The dad lay twisted across the back bench. The girls nodded beside him like branches from the same dreaming tree. The dog stretched at their feet, tail twitching in sleep. The cat claimed the dashboard, a silent sentinel watching the dark. Outside, the relief lot never stilled. Helicopters thudded overhead, blades chopping the night into restless pieces. National Guard trucks came and went, tires grinding gravel, radios murmuring. Dogs barked, sharp, lonely, insistent. Families shifted, whispered, argued, comforted. The air was thick with diesel, sweat, and the sterile sting of cleaner. And then the sky changed. Dawn came soft and gold, spilling across brick facades and ragged tents like a benediction. The mountains caught it first, then rooftops, then gravel underfoot, turning ash into warmth, shadows into something gentler. Pete returned from the aid table, thermos full and steaming. He handed out paper cups, unscrewed the lid, and let the scent rise, rich, earthy, forgiving. One by one he poured for the adults, the liquid dark and warm against the morning chill. The youngest reached for her dad's cup, took a bold sip, and puckered instantly. "Gross," she said, wiping her tongue on her sleeve like it had betrayed her. The adults laughed, quiet, real, surprised by the sound. The kind of laugh that hadn't surfaced in days. The kind that meant they might be okay. Goldie trotted over, tail high. Pete knelt and scratched behind his ears, murmuring something low and kind. The dog leaned in, pressing his weight into Pete's chest, a gesture of trust and belonging. Pete smiled, forehead against fur, eyes closed for a moment longer than necessary. Then she appeared. They heard the click of heels first, purposeful, steady, impossible to ignore. Tousled hair, eyes wet but resolute, jaw set. Her face was lined with exhaustion, yet she moved like someone who hadn't broken. Dad exhaled, shoulders loosening. Their eyes met. No words, just the relief of survival, the recognition of what had passed, and what remained. He stepped closer. She took his hand, grease-stained, both tired, both grateful. She'd heard about the dog saga, on the phone, now wholly en court between vans, tents, and guardsmen. She gave Pete a warm smile. "Nice dog. Have you named it?" Then she turned to her husband, eyes steady, daring him to object. He didn't. The kids had no clue what had just been negotiated. No idea what lines had been drawn, or quietly erased. They were simply thrilled to see their mom again. With the negotiations settled, she released her husband's hand and knelt. The girls ran to her, arms wide and hearts bursting. She opened her arms and braced herself. They collided into her like a wave, limbs tangling, cheeks pressed close, laughter spilling between sobs. She held them tightly, rocking gently, kissing their hair as if to anchor them back to safety. Their small bodies clung to hers with the fierce relief of reunion, and for a moment, the world softened around them. She smelled their hair, kissed their heads, and whispered softly, "There's my firebugs."